everyone, my name is Daniel, an indie game dev working on a shoot 'em up roguelike game called Osor. And during this whole time developing a roguelike game, I of course needed to make boss fights at some point. To make those as good as possible, I also researched this topic and tried to analyze how really successful games handle boss fights. Today, around a year later, I'm going to share the results of the research with you so you can make better boss fights as well. First of all, we need to care about the mechanics of a boss. This is obviously up to you, but there are a few rules. The design of the boss fight should represent the design of the section before. As with most games, your game probably has some kind of areas, zones or levels. In each zone or area or whatever you like to call this, there's also a slight difference in design to keep the player engaged. Here's an example. Your game is a platformer, and in the second world, bounce pads get introduced as a new mechanic. To make that boss at the end of the world a real test of the player's understanding of the game systems, you definitely need to feature this new system in the fight. But that actually gets pretty boring after some time, because making a boss just repeat stuff isn't too exciting. That's why it can also include a little bit of a teaser of the following systems. Let's say in World 3 of the example from before, there's a new dash ability the player unlocks. We could already give the player a little teaser on this by giving the boss of World 2 a dash move. Now we've got two types of mechanics. The ones that test already existing knowledge and the ones that tease future systems. But actually there's one last, and this is the unique mechanic that really stands for the boss. In terms of balancing, 2/3 of the boss fights mechanics should be testing ones. 1 or 2 mechanics should be signature moves, and the rest, which is not a lot, should be mechanics that show off future systems. Now let's have a look at the difficulty. Obviously it depends on your game how difficult a boss is, but the first fight should definitely be easier than the final one. What can you do, however, if there's no order of which bosses to fight when? The first answer that might come to your mind is to make them the exact same difficulty, and of course this is a solution, but I would make them harder in some terms and easier in others. In the total difficulty they will just be the same, but some seem harder and some seem easier because every player has different strengths. Some people are better at dodging and some are just better at attacking. Now in terms of difficulty, there's one last thing I want to say. But when there's an order of which boss to fight when, the first boss should be a little harder than the second. It's the one that focuses a little more on testing your skill and knowledge. It makes sure that you're ready for the rest, and even if you keep failing at beating this one, you get to the point where you properly learned everything and then beat it. Phases or stages are actually a big part of making better boss fights, because they keep the player engaged by changing up the gameplay a bit. This can be the whole attack pattern, the location, or just a new attack that gets added to the fight. For harder bosses, the switch of the attack pattern is one of the best switches of a phase, as you see with the final boss fight in Hollow Knight or any boss in Cuphead. For most games, however, and easier bosses, the addition of an attack is the best. Changing the location works for some, and when changing it, my advice is to combine it with the concept of introducing new ideas. In my game, for example, the locations wouldn't make too much sense, and switching the attack pattern completely could end up in a bit too much frustration in a roguelike game. So I mainly went with the addition of a mechanic. And that was kind of the mindset I had when creating any of the 10 bosses in my game. Of course, all of that is quite basic, and a detailed instruction will be created by you when you're actually creating a boss fight for your game. I'm probably not going to be able to make bosses in a future project the same way I do now for Osor, because it is so different for any genre and actually every single game. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it so much if you liked and subscribed, and I guess I will see you next time then. Cheers!